The morning sunlight filtered through the kitchen window, casting shadows across the granite countertop where my mother stood, arranging white roses with surgical precision. Each stem was measured, each petal positioned exactly where she deemed it should be. Perfect, just like everything else had to be for Seraphina's wedding. Cordelia, could you please move those boxes to the garage? Mom's voice carried that particular tone she used when she wanted something done without question. We can't have clutter visible when the caterers arrive for the final tasting. I glanced at the boxes she'd indicated, my boxes, the ones containing my photography equipment, carefully packed after last night's shoot. I'd been storing them here temporarily while apartment hunting, but apparently even my professional gear was considered unsightly clutter in the pre-wedding chaos. Of course, I said, lifting the first box. It was heavier than it looked, filled with camera lenses that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Not that anyone in this house had bothered to ask about my work lately. Seraphina appeared in the kitchen doorway, her blonde hair already styled in elaborate curls, despite the fact that her wedding wasn't until tomorrow. She wore a silk robe that probably cost more than my last 3 paychecks combined, and her engagement ring caught the light with every gesture. "Mother, the florist is asking about the altar arrangements again," she said, barely glancing in my direction. I told them exactly what we discussed, but they seemed confused about the height specifications. "I'll call them directly," Mom replied, setting down her flowers with a sigh that suggested she was the only competent person in a world full of incompetence. Sometimes you have to manage everything yourself to ensure it's done properly. I continued moving boxes, each trip to the garage providing a brief respite from the suffocating perfection inside. The house had been transformed into a pre-wedding staging area, with color-coded schedules taped to every surface and spreadsheets tracking everything from guest dietary restrictions to the exact timing of each photograph. My stepfather, Harrison, had retreated to his study days ago, emerging only for meals and to write increasingly large checks. "Cordelia, when you're finished with that, could you help me with the gift display?" Seraphina's request sounded casual, but I recognized the underlying expectation. In this family, I was the designated helper, the one who handled the tasks that others found beneath them. The gift table occupied most of the formal dining room, groaning under the weight of crystal vases, silver serving sets, and boxes wrapped in expensive paper. Each present had been carefully logged in a leather-bound book with space for thank you note tracking and return gift coordination. The organization was impressive, if somewhat obsessive. "Some of these boxes are quite heavy," Seraphina noted as I began rearranging the display according to her detailed diagram. "That enormous silver tea service from the Worthington family weighs at least 30 pounds. I can barely lift it myself." I hefted the box easily, placing it in the designated corner spot. Years of carrying camera equipment had given me more upper body strength than my delicate appearance suggested. Not that anyone noticed such details about me. "Perfect," Seraphina approved, checking items off her list with a gold pen. "Mother was right to put you in charge of the physical arrangements. You've always been so practical about these things." Practical. It was the word this family always used to describe me, usually accompanied by a tone that suggested being practical was something slightly unfortunate, like being born with flat feet or poor eyesight. Not beautiful like Seraphina, Not charming like our younger brother Thaddeus, just practical Cordelia, who could be counted on to handle whatever tasks needed handling. The afternoon brought a parade of vendors, each requiring decisions that sent Serafina into increasingly dramatic states of anxiety. The cake decorator needed final approval on the gold leaf application. The photographer wanted to review the shot list for the 20th time. The string quartet had questions about acoustics in the garden pavilion. I found myself serving as translator between Serafina's emotional reactions and the vendor's practical needs, smoothing over tensions and finding solutions that satisfied everyone. I don't understand why everything has to be so complicated, Serafina declared after the florist left, looking exhausted despite having done nothing more strenuous than point at flower arrangements. All I want is a perfect wedding, and everyone seems determined to create problems. It will be beautiful, I assured her, meaning it despite everything. Whatever my feelings about the family dynamics, Serafina deserved to have the wedding she wanted. You've planned every detail carefully. Nothing will go wrong. Mom appeared in the doorway, her expression unreadable. Cordelia, I need to speak with you privately. We walked to the sunroom where Mom settled into her favorite chair with the air of someone about to deliver difficult but necessary truths. I remained standing, sensing that this wasn't going to be a casual conversation. Tomorrow is an important day for this family, she began, her voice taking on the formal tone she used for serious discussions. Serafina's wedding represents everything we've worked toward. The right connections, the proper presentation, the kind of event that establishes social position for years to come. I nodded, uncertain where this was leading, but recognizing the weight she placed on such occasions. In Mom's world, appearances weren't just important, they were everything. I need you to understand that tomorrow isn't about individual preferences or personal grievances, she continued. It's about supporting Serafina and ensuring that nothing disrupts the harmony we've created. The words hit me like cold water. What exactly are you saying? Mom's expression softened slightly, but her tone remained firm. I'm saying that tomorrow requires everyone to put the family first. No drama, no attention-seeking behavior, no attempts to make the day about anything other than Serafina's happiness. I stared at her, processing the implications of what she'd just said. You think I would deliberately sabotage Serafina's wedding? I think you've been under a lot of stress lately, Mom replied carefully. The apartment hunting, the freelance work, the uncertainty about your future. Sometimes when people feel overlooked, they make choices designed to regain attention. The accusation hung between us like a toxic cloud. After all the years of quietly handling whatever tasks they assigned me, after all the times I'd put family needs ahead of my own plans, she was worried that I might cause a scene at the wedding. I would never do anything to hurt Serafina's wedding, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I can't believe you think I would. I'm not thinking anything specific, Mom said quickly. I'm simply ensuring that we're all on the same page about expectations. Tomorrow is about celebration and joy, not about airing family issues or creating unnecessary tension. The conversation continued for several more minutes, but the core message had been delivered. I was being preemptively managed, treated like a potential problem that needed to be contained rather than a family member who might genuinely want to support the bride. That evening, as the house settled into its pre-wedding quiet, I found myself walking through the rooms we'd transformed into a wedding showcase. Everything was pristine, perfectly arranged, ready for tomorrow's photographer to capture images that would live in albums and social media posts for years to come. The whole production had cost more than most people's annual salaries, funded by Harrison's successful medical practice and Mom's inheritance from her first husband. I paused in front of the gift table, studying the mountain of presents that represented the couple's social network: crystal from college friends, silver from family connections, art pieces from Harrison's medical colleagues. Each gift carefully chosen to reflect the giver's taste and the relationship's importance. Everything documented, cataloged, assigned its proper place in the complex social calculus that governed my family's world. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Checking final details for Monday. Everything on schedule. Will call tomorrow evening for confirmation. I deleted the message immediately, my heart racing despite the innocuous words. Some conversations couldn't be preserved. Some plans couldn't leave digital trails. Not yet. The wedding day dawned clear and bright, exactly as predicted by the weather service Mom had hired to provide hourly updates. I woke before dawn, partly from habit and partly from the nervous energy that had been building for weeks. Today was important for reasons that went far beyond Serafina's happiness, though she would certainly have her perfect wedding. The house transformed into controlled chaos as hairstylists, makeup artists, and photographers took over every available space. Serafina held court in the master bedroom, surrounded by women whose job it was to make her look flawless. I helped where needed, mostly by staying out of the way and handling the small crises that arose throughout the morning. "Cordelia, could you check on the flowers?" Mom called from the hallway, where she was directing traffic with military precision. The delivery truck should have arrived by now. I made my way to the garden, where workers were setting up chairs and adjusting the altar decorations. Everything looked exactly as planned, from the white rose petals scattered along the aisle to the string quartet tuning their instruments in the gazebo. The attention to detail was remarkable, a testament to months of careful coordination. "Beautiful setup," I commented to the head florist, who was making final adjustments to the bridal arch. "Your mother has excellent taste," he replied, stepping back to assess his work. "Very clear vision, very specific requirements. Makes our job much easier when the client knows exactly what they want." The ceremony itself was everything Serafina had dreamed of. She looked radiant in her designer gown, her smile genuine as she walked down the aisle toward Marcus, her groom of 3 years. The vows were traditional but heartfelt, the music perfectly timed, the photography capturing every significant moment. Even I had to admit it was beautiful, the kind of wedding that would be remembered fondly by everyone in attendance. During the reception, I found myself in my usual role as the family member who ensured everything ran smoothly behind the scenes. I coordinated with caterers, directed lost guests, and helped elderly relatives find their tables. It was satisfying work in its own way, contributing to an event that brought genuine joy to people I cared about. "You've been wonderful today," Harrison told me during a quiet moment between courses. "I know this couldn't have been easy with all the attention focused on Serafina, but you've handled everything with such grace." His acknowledgement meant more than he probably realized. Harrison had married Mom when I was 15, and our relationship had developed slowly over the years. He was a good man, if somewhat overwhelmed by the complex dynamics of his blended family. It's been a beautiful day, I replied honestly. Serafina deserves all this happiness. She does, he agreed, then paused. But so do you, Cordelia. I hope you know that. The wedding concluded with a spectacular fireworks display that lit up the evening sky. Visible from miles away, guests lingered on the terrace, reluctant to end such a perfect celebration. Serafina and Marcus made their rounds, thanking everyone for attending, accepting congratulations and best wishes from friends and family. I can't believe it's over, Serafina said to me as the last guest departed. It feels like we've been planning this forever, and now it's just a memory. A beautiful memory, I corrected, helping her gather the train of her dress. You looked absolutely radiant. Thank you for everything today, she said, her voice softer than usual. I know we don't always, I know things can be complicated between us sometimes, but having you here, knowing you were handling all the details, it made everything so much easier. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever received from her, and I appreciated the gesture, even if it didn't address the deeper issues between us. The following days passed in a blur of cleanup and thank you note writing. The house slowly returned to normal as rental equipment was collected and decorations were stored away. Mom threw herself into organizing Serafina's wedding photos, creating multiple albums and digital galleries to document every aspect of the event. These turned out beautifully, she announced, spreading photos across the dining room table. The photographer captured everything perfectly. Look at this one of Serafina coming down the aisle. Pure elegance. I studied the images, noting the technical quality and artistic composition. The photographer had indeed done excellent work, though I found myself mentally adjusting some of the shots, imagining how I might have framed them differently. You should see the one of the family group, Mom continued, finding the formal portrait we'd taken during the reception. Everyone looks so distinguished. This will be perfect for the Christmas cards. The photos showed our blended family in all its complexity. Harrison and Mom in the center, looking proud and content. Serafina and Marcus flanking them, still glowing from their wedding celebration. Thaddeus on one side, handsome and confident as always, and me on the other side, smiling politely, but somehow separate from the group's warm intimacy. I'll need copies of several of these, I said, studying the images more carefully, for my own albums. Of course, Mom agreed, though I'm not sure how many you'll really need. It's not as if you're planning your own wedding anytime soon. The comment was delivered casually, without apparent malice, but it landed with the weight of all our family's unspoken assumptions about my future. At 29, I was considered well past the ideal marriage age by my family's standards. My focus on photography, rather than husband hunting, was seen as a pleasant hobby that had unfortunately delayed more important life goals. You never know, I replied, my tone carefully neutral. Life has a way of surprising us. I suppose it does, Mom said, though her expression suggested she found that particular surprise unlikely. That evening, I returned to my temporary apartment, a small studio space I'd rented while searching for something more permanent. The walls were lined with my photography equipment and prints from recent shoots. Corporate events, family portraits, the occasional wedding for clients who appreciated my artistic approach rather than just wanting traditional poses. My phone rang, displaying a number I'd been expecting all day. I answered on the second ring. Everything went perfectly, I said without preamble. Excellent, came the reply, a warm voice I'd grown to trust over the past several months. I was hoping you'd say that. Are you ready for Monday? More than ready, I assured them, glancing around my small apartment. I've been ready for months. Good. The timing couldn't be better, given the weekend's events. Your family will be completely unprepared for what's coming. I thought about the wedding photos spread across Mom's dining room table, about the assumptions underlying every family interaction, about the casual dismissal of my potential for surprising anyone. They certainly will be, I agreed. Monday morning arrived with unusual energy. I woke early, spending extra time on my appearance and choosing my outfit carefully. Today required a different version of myself than the practical, helpful Cordelia my family expected. Today called for confidence, authority, and the ability to command attention in rooms full of people who preferred to overlook me. The photography studio, where I had been freelancing, was buzzing with activity when I arrived. Several shoots were scheduled throughout the day, including one that would require my complete attention to detail. I spent the morning reviewing equipment, checking lighting setups, and confirming arrangements with clients. You seem different today, observed Marcus Chen, the studio owner who'd become both mentor and friend over the past year. More focused than usual, if that's even possible. Big day? I replied, adjusting a camera lens with practiced precision. Sometimes everything comes together at once. Good things, I hope? The best things, I confirmed, though I kept the details to myself. Marcus was trustworthy, but some plans required complete discretion until the moment of revelation. The afternoon brought the photo shoot I'd been preparing for, a complex project involving multiple locations and precise timing. Everything had to be perfect, from lighting conditions to wardrobe changes to the careful choreography of moving equipment between sites. It was the kind of challenge I thrived on, the type of work that reminded me why I'd chosen photography as more than just a hobby. As the day progressed, I found my phone buzzing regularly with messages that I couldn't answer immediately. Family members checking in, vendors confirming details, friends making social plans. All of it would have to wait until evening, when I could finally turn my attention to personal matters. The studio work concluded successfully, just as the sun was setting, golden light streaming through the windows and creating the kind of natural illumination that made even ordinary moments look magical. I packed my equipment carefully, each piece representing an investment in my professional future and artistic vision. Excellent work today, Marcus commented as I prepared to leave. Whatever you're planning for tonight, I hope it goes exactly as you envision it. I smiled, appreciating his support, even if he didn't fully understand what he was supporting. Thank you. I think it will. The drive home took me past familiar landmarks, neighborhoods where I'd grown up, and streets that held memories of family outings and childhood adventures. Everything looked the same as always, but I felt fundamentally different, as if I were seeing it all from a new perspective. My phone had been silent for the past hour, which meant the preliminary arrangements were complete and everyone was in position. The timing had to be exact, the coordination flawless. Too early and the impact would be lost. Too late and the opportunity would pass. I pulled into my apartment complex, noting that several parking spaces were occupied by cars I didn't recognize. Good. That meant people were already arriving, already beginning to understand that tonight would be different from their expectations. As I climbed the stairs to my small studio, I could hear voices through thin walls, the sound of conversation and nervous laughter that suggested gathering anticipation. Everyone was here. Everyone was ready. Now it was time to show my family exactly how much they'd underestimated practical, overlooked Cordelia. I paused at my door, key in hand, and took a deep breath. Once I opened this door and stepped inside, there would be no going back. The careful plans that had been months in the making would finally unfold, and my family would discover that their assumptions about my life had been completely wrong. The key turned in the lock, and I stepped inside to find my small apartment transformed into something I'd never quite imagined possible. The space was filled with people, all of them smiling, all of them waiting for what came next. "Welcome to our engagement party," said a voice I'd been longing to hear all day. I turned to find Alexander Pemberton standing in my tiny kitchenette, wearing the kind of confident smile that had first caught my attention 6 months ago at a gallery opening. Behind him, my transformed apartment held at least 30 people, all of them dressed elegantly, despite the modest surroundings. "Alex," I breathed, still processing the scene before me. "I can't believe you managed all this." "With considerable help," he replied, gesturing toward a familiar figure emerging from what had been my bedroom. "Your assistant proved invaluable in coordinating the details." Jasmine Rodriguez, my business partner and closest friend, appeared carrying a tray of champagne glasses that definitely hadn't come from my kitchen cabinet. She was grinning with the satisfaction of someone who'd successfully executed a complex surprise. "The look on your face right now is exactly why we went to all this trouble," she announced, offering me a glass of what appeared to be very expensive champagne. Though I have to admit, transforming a 400-square-foot studio into party space challenged even my event planning skills. I accepted the champagne, my mind still catching up to the reality of what was happening. "How long have you been planning this?" "Since the day you told me about your family's assumption that you'd never have your own wedding," Alex replied, moving closer and taking my free hand. I decided it was time to prove them spectacularly wrong. The apartment had indeed been transformed. Professional lighting created warm ambiance despite the small space. Flower arrangements that must have cost more than my monthly rent adorned every available surface. A string quartet was somehow managing to play in the corner where my desk usually sat. The effect was intimate rather than cramped, elegant rather than pretentious. "Ladies and gentlemen," Alex called out, his voice carrying easily through the small space. "If I could have your attention for a moment." The conversations quieted, and I found myself the center of attention in a way that felt both thrilling and terrifying. These weren't my family members who expected me to blend into the background. These were Alex's friends from the art world, my photography clients, Jasmine's event planning contacts, people who knew me as a professional in my own right rather than as Seraphina's practical half-sister. 3 days ago, I asked Cordelia to marry me," Alex announced, his hand tightening on mine. "Tonight, with all of you as witnesses, I want to celebrate not just our engagement, but the beginning of a partnership between two people who see the world through the same artistic lens." The room erupted in applause and congratulations, glasses clinking and voices raised in genuine joy. I felt overwhelmed by the warmth of it all, the stark contrast to my family's assumptions about my romantic prospects. "There's more," Jasmine added, producing an envelope from her purse with theatrical flair. Much more. She handed me the envelope, and I recognized the letterhead immediately. Pemberton Gallery, one of the most prestigious art spaces in the city. My heart began racing as I opened it, though Alex's smile suggested I already knew what I'd find inside. "We'd like to offer you a solo exhibition," Alex explained as I scanned the formal contract. 60 of your best photographs, professional framing and lighting, opening reception with full catering and publicity. The works? I stared at the document, reading the terms twice to make sure I understood correctly. Not only was this a solo show at a gallery I'd dreamed of exhibiting in, but the financial terms were extraordinary. Sales commissions, exhibition fees, even a modest advance against future sales. The total package is worth approximately $200,000, Alex continued, his voice warm with pride. Between the exhibition value, the advance, and the expected sales from your work, you'll be establishing yourself as a serious artist while building significant financial independence. $200,000. The exact figure that had been echoing in my mind for days, though in a completely different context than my family would ever imagine. "This is incredible," I managed, though the words felt inadequate for the magnitude of what was happening. "I can't believe you arranged all this." "Believe it," Jasmine said firmly, "and there's one more surprise." She gestured toward the door, where I heard familiar voices in the hallway. My heart sank as I recognized the tones, though I couldn't make out specific words yet. "You invited my family?" I asked, uncertain whether this was wonderful or terrible news. "We thought they should be here," Alex replied carefully, "though I suspect they might be somewhat surprised by what they find." The door opened, and Mom stepped inside, followed by Harrison, Serafina, and Marcus. They were still dressed in their post-wedding casual clothes, clearly having been summoned here directly from whatever they'd been doing to process the weekend's events. Mom's expression went through several rapid changes as she took in the scene. Confusion gave way to surprise, then to something that might have been calculation as she assessed the obvious expense and sophistication of the gathering. "Cordelia," she said finally, her voice carefully controlled, "what exactly is going on here?" The room had gone quiet again, sensing the tension that accompanied my family's arrival. I felt Alex's supportive presence beside me, Jasmine's encouraging nod, and the curious attention of 30 people who were about to witness a family dynamic they couldn't possibly understand. "This is my engagement party," I announced, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Alexander and I are getting married." The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's face went pale, then flushed with what I recognized as barely controlled anger. Harrison looked genuinely confused, as if he'd walked into the wrong apartment by mistake. Serafina's mouth had fallen open, her usual composure completely shattered. "Your engagement party?" Mom repeated, her voice rising slightly. "When exactly did you get engaged? And who is Alexander?" 3 days ago, I replied, reaching for Alex's hand. "And Alexander Pemberton owns the gallery where I'll be having my first solo exhibition next month." More silence, this time heavy with implications that were clearly dawning on my family members. They were beginning to understand that this wasn't just a small celebration they'd stumbled into, but a major life event they'd known nothing about. "The Pemberton Gallery?" Harrison asked, his medical practice having brought him into contact with the city's art scene on various occasions. "That's..." That's quite prestigious. It is, Alex confirmed, extending his hand to my stepfather, Alexander Pemberton. I'm delighted to finally meet Cordelia's family, though I understand you've had quite a busy week with the wedding. Harrison shook Alex's hand automatically, but his eyes were fixed on me with a mixture of bewilderment and what might have been respect. He was beginning to piece together the scope of what I'd accomplished while they were focused on Serafina's wedding preparations. "How long have you been planning this?" Mom asked, gesturing vaguely at the transformed apartment and the crowd of well-dressed guests. "The engagement party? About a week," I replied truthfully. "The exhibition and everything that goes with it? Several months?" I watched her process this information, calculating backwards through recent conversations and family interactions. She was realizing that while she'd been worried about me causing drama at Serafina's wedding, I'd been quietly building a completely different life than anything she'd imagined. "Several months," she repeated slowly. "And you didn't think to mention any of this to your family?" The question hung in the air like an accusation, though I wasn't sure what exactly I was being accused of. Planning my future, falling in love, building a career, all of the above. "I was waiting for the right time," I said, which was both true and completely inadequate as an explanation. Serafina had recovered enough to speak, though her voice still carried shock. "You're really getting married? After all your talk about focusing on your career and not being interested in traditional life paths?" "I'm getting married and focusing on my career," I corrected gently. "They're not mutually exclusive goals." The distinction seemed to confuse her even more. In Serafina's world, marriage meant becoming someone's wife first and pursuing personal interests only as time and circumstances permitted. The idea that I might be marrying someone who actively supported my professional ambitions was apparently difficult to process. "When?" Mom asked, her tone suggesting she was trying to regain control of a conversation that had spiraled far beyond her expectations. "When what?" I replied, though I knew exactly what she was asking. "When is the wedding?" I glanced at Alex, who nodded encouragingly. We'd discussed this moment extensively, knowing it would be the ultimate test of our decision to move forward without my family's input or approval. "Saturday," I announced, 5 days from now. The explosion of reactions was immediate and overwhelming. Mom's carefully maintained composure shattered completely. Harrison looked like someone had just told him his medical degree was invalid. Serafina made a sound that was part gasp, part protest, part disbelief. "Saturday?" Mom's voice was approaching a register I'd rarely heard from her. "This Saturday? As in less than a week from now?" "As in exactly 5 days," I confirmed, feeling increasingly calm as their agitation mounted. "We see no reason to wait when we're both certain of what we want." "But that's impossible," Serafina protested. "You can't plan a wedding in 5 days. The venue bookings alone require months of advance notice. The catering, the flowers, the photography, the guest accommodations." She trailed off as the implications of her own words sank in. If I was having a wedding in 5 days, either it was going to be a courthouse ceremony with minimal fanfare, or I had resources and connections she didn't know about. "Actually," Alex interjected smoothly, "when you have the right relationships and sufficient motivation, quite a lot can be accomplished in a short time frame. Cordelia's wedding will be everything she wants it to be." The emphasis on Cordelia's wedding wasn't lost on anyone in the room. This wasn't about family expectations or social obligations. This was about what I wanted, planned according to my preferences, and executed with my vision in mind. Where? Harrison asked, his practical nature asserting itself despite his obvious confusion. The Pemberton estate, Alex replied, naming a property that even my family would recognize as one of the most exclusive wedding venues in the region. It's been in my family for 3 generations. We're quite fond of hosting celebrations there. I watched my family absorb this information, each detail adding another layer to their growing understanding of exactly how much they'd misjudged my situation. The Pemberton estate wasn't just expensive, it was the kind of place that required family connections and social standing that money alone couldn't buy. How many guests? Mom asked, her event planning instincts apparently overriding her emotional turmoil. 200, I replied, the number I'd settled on after weeks of careful consideration. Close friends, professional colleagues, and family members who've been supportive of my relationship with Alex. The pointed reference to supportive family members landed exactly as intended. Mom's face went through another series of expressions as she realized the implications of what I'd just said. "Are we invited?" Serafina asked, her voice small and uncertain for the first time since I'd known her. The question hung in the air, loaded with everything that had passed between us over the years. Every casual dismissal, every assumption about my limitations, every conversation where I'd been treated as a supporting character in their more important stories. "That depends," I replied carefully, "on whether you can attend as guests who are genuinely happy for me rather than family members who are disappointed that I didn't ask permission before falling in love." The silence that followed was broken by one of Alex's gallery friends, approaching with champagne refills and polite inquiries about the family reunion taking place in the corner of the party. Normal social interaction resumed around us, but the bubble of tension surrounding my family remained intact. "I need some air," Mom announced, heading for the small balcony that barely qualified as outdoor space. Harrison followed her, leaving Serafina, Marcus, and me standing in an uncomfortable triangle while the party continued around us. "I don't understand any of this," Serafina said finally. "How did you meet him? When did this all start? Why didn't you tell us?" The questions were fair, even if her tone suggested she felt personally betrayed by my secrecy. I looked around the transformed apartment, at the evidence of a life I'd been building while they focused on their own concerns. "I met Alex at a gallery opening 6 months ago," I explained. "He was impressed by some photographs I'd taken of the event and asked to see more of my work. The professional relationship developed into something personal, and he's been supporting my career development ever since." "Supporting how?" Marcus asked, speaking for the first time since they'd arrived. "Introductions to collectors, connections with other gallery owners, technical advice about pricing and presentation. He's helped me understand the business side of art in ways that transformed my work from a hobby into a legitimate career." I could see them processing this information, trying to reconcile the practical, helpful Cordelia they knew with this version who had apparently been building substantial professional relationships while they weren't paying attention. "And the wedding budget?" Serafina asked, her voice carefully neutral. "The Pemberton estate isn't exactly affordable for someone living in a studio apartment." It was the question I'd been expecting, the one that cut to the heart of their confusion about my circumstances. They were trying to figure out how I'd gone from struggling freelancer to bride with access to $200,000 worth of wedding celebration. The exhibition advance covers most of the costs, I explained, gesturing toward the contract Jasmine still held, plus some additional financial arrangements that come with marrying into a family that owns one of the city's premier art galleries. The implications of what I'd just said settled over them like a blanket. I wasn't just marrying Alex, I was marrying into the Pemberton family with all the social and financial advantages that entailed. The practical, overlooked half-sister had somehow managed to secure not just love, but a partnership that elevated her entire life circumstances. Mom returned from the balcony with Harrison close behind, both of them looking like they'd had an intense conversation in very little time. "We need to talk," Mom announced, her voice carrying the authority she used for family meetings about serious matters. Privately, I glanced around the party, noting that most guests were engaged in animated conversations about art and upcoming exhibitions. Alex was discussing photography techniques with several collectors who seemed genuinely interested in my work. Jasmine was coordinating something with the catering staff that had apparently materialized from nowhere. "After the party," I replied. "This celebration is important to me, and I want to enjoy it." "Cordelia," Mom's tone carried a warning that would have sent me scurrying to comply a year ago. Tonight, surrounded by people who respected my work and celebrated my happiness, it had no power over me. "After the party," I repeated firmly. "Alex and I have guests to attend to, and I have 5 years of professional relationships to nurture. We can discuss family matters later." The finality in my voice surprised all of us, including me. This was new territory for our family dynamics, me setting boundaries and refusing to prioritize their immediate needs over my own plans. "Fine," Mom said after a moment that stretched uncomfortably long. "We'll wait." But as I turned back toward the party, I caught the expression on her face and realized that waiting wasn't going to make this conversation any easier. If anything, it was going to give her time to formulate arguments and strategies for whatever battle she thought we were about to fight. The evening continued with a dreamlike quality that made everything feel both surreal and completely natural. Alex introduced me to gallery owners who expressed genuine interest in my work. Art collectors asked thoughtful questions about my techniques and artistic vision. Friends from various professional contexts mingled comfortably, creating the kind of networking atmosphere that usually took months to arrange. "You're glowing," Jasmine observed during a quiet moment near the kitchen area. "This is what happiness looks like on you." I smiled, recognizing the truth in her observation. Despite my family's presence and the tension that had accompanied their arrival, I felt more genuinely content than I had in years. "It's been a perfect evening," I agreed, even with the unexpected family drama. "How do you think they're really taking it?" she asked, glancing toward the corner where my family had clustered together, clearly having intense whispered conversations. I followed her gaze, noting the body language that suggested ongoing disagreement and confusion. "About as well as expected. They're struggling to reconcile their assumptions about my life with the reality of what I've actually accomplished." "And after Saturday, when you're Mrs. Alexander Pemberton and have a solo exhibition opening?" I considered the question, imagining how family dynamics might shift when I was no longer the practical, helpful daughter who could be counted on to handle whatever tasks needed handling, when I was, instead, someone with my own social standing and financial independence. I think, I said slowly, everything is going to be very different. The party guests began departing around 11, each offering congratulations and promises to attend Saturday's ceremony. Alex moved through the crowd with practiced social grace, ensuring everyone felt personally acknowledged while gradually encouraging the natural wind down of the evening. I found myself studying him as he worked the room, appreciating the confident way he navigated conversations and the genuine warmth he showed toward people from vastly different social circles. My family remained clustered in their corner, clearly waiting for the privacy they'd requested earlier. Harrison checked his watch periodically, while Mom maintained the polite smile she wore when enduring social situations she couldn't control. Serafina and Marcus whispered intermittently, their heads bent together in the kind of intense consultation that suggested ongoing disagreement about something significant. "Ready for round two?" Jasmine asked quietly, helping me stack empty champagne glasses on a borrowed tray. I glanced toward my family, noting the tension in their postures and the way they'd positioned themselves like a united front preparing for battle. As ready as anyone can be for a conversation they've been dreading for 6 months. "You could always reschedule," she suggested, though her tone indicated she didn't think I would take that option. "No," I replied, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "If we're going to rebuild any kind of relationship, it needs to start with honesty, all of it." The last guest departed with promises to see us Saturday, leaving the apartment feeling suddenly cavernous despite its modest size. Alex supervised the efficient removal of rental equipment by staff who worked with the kind of quiet professionalism that suggested they handled such events regularly. Within 20 minutes, my studio had been restored to something resembling its normal configuration, though the lingering scent of expensive flowers provided evidence of the evening's transformation. "Shall we sit?" I suggested, gesturing toward the small seating area that usually accommodated no more than 4 people comfortably. We arranged ourselves awkwardly, my family taking up most of the available space while Alex and I claimed the remaining chairs. The intimate proximity forced a kind of attention that would have been easier to avoid in a larger room, but perhaps that directness was exactly what this conversation required. "I think," Mom began, her voice carrying the measured tone she used for difficult discussions, "we need to start with why you felt the need to keep all of this secret from your family." The question was predictable, but the underlying accusation still stung. She was framing my discretion as deception, my careful timing as deliberate exclusion, my independence as family betrayal. "I kept it private," I corrected, "because I needed time to build something solid before exposing it to outside opinions and expectations." "Outside opinions?" Serafina's voice rose slightly. "We're your family, not strangers offering unsolicited advice." I looked at her directly, remembering countless conversations where my choices had been questioned, my ambitions dismissed, my capabilities underestimated. When exactly have any of you shown genuine interest in my photography career? When have you asked about my professional goals or offered support for my artistic development? The silence that followed was answer enough, though I could see Harrison shifting uncomfortably as he recognized the truth in my observation. "We've always been supportive," Mom protested, though her tone lacked conviction. "Maybe we haven't been as involved in the details, but we've certainly encouraged your creative interests." "You've tolerated them," I replied, keeping my voice level despite the frustration building in my chest. "There's a difference between encouragement and tolerance, just as there's a difference between being supportive and being dismissive." Alex reached for my hand, a subtle gesture that provided both comfort and reminder that I wasn't alone in this conversation. His presence shifted the dynamic in ways my family was clearly still processing, evidence that I had allies they'd never acknowledged or considered. "Perhaps," Harrison interjected carefully, "we could focus on moving forward rather than relitigating past misunderstandings. What matters now is that you're happy and building a successful career. We want to be part of that." His diplomatic approach was appreciated, even if it avoided addressing the deeper issues that had created our current situation. But Harrison had always been the family member most capable of setting aside ego in favor of practical problem solving. Being part of it means accepting that my life doesn't require your approval or management, I said, meeting his eyes directly. "It means respecting my choices, even when they don't align with your expectations or timeline." "Even when those choices affect the entire family?" Mom asked, her control beginning to slip. "Your wedding is in 5 days, Cordelia. 5 days. Do you have any idea how that makes us look to our friends and social connections?" There it was, the real issue underneath all the shock and confusion. Not concern for my happiness or worry about my rushed decision, but anxiety about how my choices reflected on their social standing. "How exactly does my wedding make you look bad?" I asked, genuinely curious about her reasoning. "It suggests we're not close," she replied, as if explaining something obvious. "Mothers are typically involved in their daughter's wedding planning. When people discover we knew nothing about your engagement or your ceremony, they'll assume there's been some kind of family rift." The irony was almost overwhelming. She was worried about appearing distant from a daughter she'd actually kept at arm's length for years, concerned about social perceptions that might finally reflect the reality of our relationship. "There hasn't been a rift," I said carefully. "There's been a gradual recognition that we have very different values and priorities. Your concern about appearances proves my point perfectly." "That's not fair," Serafina protested. "You're acting like we're terrible people when all we're doing is trying to understand why you've shut us out of something this important." I studied my stepsister, noting the genuine hurt in her expression alongside the indignation. She wasn't entirely wrong. My secrecy had been hurtful, even if it had been necessary for my own emotional protection. "I'm not shutting you out now," I pointed out. "You're invited to the wedding. You're welcome to celebrate with me. But I won't apologize for planning my life according to my own preferences rather than your expectations." "And if we can't attend on such short notice?" Mom asked, her tone suggesting this was a legitimate concern rather than a passive-aggressive threat. "Then you'll miss it," I replied simply. "Just like you've missed most of the important moments in my adult life because they weren't convenient or didn't fit your schedule." The accusation landed heavily, and I could see my family members exchanging glances that suggested they were recognizing patterns they'd previously ignored or dismissed. "That's not true," Mom said, but her voice lacked the conviction of someone who was certain of her position. "Isn't it?" I challenged. "When was the last time any of you attended one of my photography exhibitions? When did you last ask about a client or congratulate me on a successful project? When have you ever treated my career as something more than a pleasant hobby that fills time until I find more serious pursuits?" Alex squeezed my hand gently, a reminder to maintain perspective even while expressing legitimate grievances. He was right. This conversation could easily devolve into a recitation of past slights that would accomplish nothing constructive. "The point isn't to catalog everything that's gone wrong," I continued, moderating my tone. "The point is to establish new patterns going forward. I'm marrying someone who supports my professional ambitions and shares my artistic vision. I'm building a career that provides both creative fulfillment and financial independence. Those are positive developments that deserve celebration, not criticism." "We're not criticizing," Harrison said quickly. "We're adjusting to some very significant news delivered in an unexpected way. Surely you can understand why we might need time to process everything." His reasonable tone was exactly what the conversation needed, though I could see Mom struggling with his diplomatic approach. She preferred direct confrontation to careful negotiation, especially when she felt her authority was being challenged. "Processing is fine," I agreed, "but I won't accept judgment or attempts to manage decisions that are already made. My wedding is Saturday. My exhibition opens the following month. These aren't plans that require family approval or input, but they're plans that could benefit from family support," Alex interjected quietly. Speaking for the first time since the conversation began, Cordelia has built something remarkable while maintaining complete financial independence and artistic integrity. That's worthy of celebration, regardless of how surprised anyone might be by the timeline. His words carried weight that mine couldn't, partly because he was an outsider without emotional investment in our family dynamics, and partly because his professional credentials gave him authority in areas where my family had always dismissed my expertise. "You're absolutely right," Harrison agreed, directing his attention toward Alex with genuine interest. "I'd like to understand more about the exhibition and what it represents for Cordelia's career development." The shift in conversation provided welcome relief from the emotional intensity of family grievances. Alex explained the significance of a solo show at his gallery, the financial structure of artist representation, and the professional networking opportunities that would result from the exhibition's success. His enthusiasm for my work was evident in every detail he shared, creating a stark contrast to my family's historical indifference. $200,000? Serafina repeated slowly, as if testing the reality of the figure. "That's more than most people make in several years." "It's more than I've ever made from my photography," I confirmed, "but it represents years of building relationships, developing technical skills, and creating a substantial portfolio of professional quality work. The success isn't accidental or overnight." I could see them recalibrating their understanding of my circumstances, recognizing that the practical, helpful Cordelia they'd taken for granted had been quietly building something significant while they focused on their own concerns. "I owe you an apology," Mom said suddenly, her voice softer than it had been all evening. "I've clearly underestimated what you were accomplishing. That was unfair to you, and I'm sorry." The admission caught me off guard, partly because genuine apologies were rare from Mom, and partly because I'd expected her to maintain her defensive position throughout the conversation. "Thank you," I replied, unsure how to respond to such unexpected acknowledgement. "I appreciate that." "But I still don't understand the secrecy," she continued, apparently unable to let the issue rest entirely. "If you are building something this significant, why not share it with us? Why not let us be part of your success?" The question exposed the heart of our ongoing disconnect. She still didn't understand that her version of being part of my success had always involved managing, directing, and ultimately controlling whatever I was trying to accomplish. "Because," I said carefully, "every time I've shared professional goals with this family, they've become group projects managed according to other people's opinions rather than my own vision. I needed to prove to myself that I could succeed independently before risking that dynamic again." "That's a reasonable concern," Harrison acknowledged, though I could see Mom bristling at the implication that she was controlling. "Trust has to be rebuilt gradually when communication patterns haven't been working effectively." "So what happens now?" Marcus asked, speaking for the first time in nearly an hour. "How do we move forward from here?" It was the essential question, the one that would determine whether tonight's revelations led to genuine change or simply added another layer of resentment to our complicated family history. "Now," I said, looking around at each of them, "you decide whether you can accept me as an adult who makes her own decisions, or whether you prefer to maintain the family dynamic where I'm expected to defer to everyone else's preferences and timeline." The challenge was explicit and unavoidable. Either they would respect my independence, or our relationship would continue to deteriorate until it became purely ceremonial. "Of course we accept your independence," Mom said quickly, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely sure what that acceptance would require from her. "Good," I replied. "Then let's talk about Saturday." The next hour was devoted to practical details that should have been handled months earlier if my family had been involved in the planning process. Alex provided information about accommodations near the estate, transportation arrangements for elderly relatives, and the dress code appropriate for an outdoor ceremony in October. My family asked careful questions that revealed their genuine desire to participate appropriately, even if they were still adjusting to their role as guests rather than coordinators. "What can we do to help?" Serafina asked as the conversation wound down, her earlier hurt replaced by what seemed like sincere eagerness to contribute. I considered the question, recognizing it as an olive branch that deserved a generous response. "Actually, there is something. Alex's family is handling most of the arrangements, but I'd love to have familiar faces helping with guest coordination during the reception. People who understand our family dynamics and can help everyone feel comfortable." The specific request gave them a meaningful role without requiring them to take over the planning process, and I could see the relief in their expressions as they accepted the responsibility. "We'll be honored to help however we can," Harrison assured me, and I heard genuine warmth in his voice for the first time all evening. As my family prepared to leave, each of them offered individual comments that suggested the conversation had shifted something fundamental in their understanding of me and my circumstances. "I'm proud of you," Mom said quietly as she gathered her purse. "I may not have expressed that well in the past, but I am. What you've accomplished is remarkable." "Thank you," I replied, feeling the weight of long-held tensions beginning to ease slightly. That means a lot to hear. Serafina lingered after the others had said their goodbyes, clearly wanting to address something privately. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, her voice uncertain, in a way I rarely heard from her, "about us not being interested in your work. You're right, and I'm sorry. I'd like to see your photographs sometime if you're willing to show them to me." The request surprised me with its simplicity and apparent sincerity. I'd like that. Maybe after the exhibition opens, when things settle down. "I'd like that too," she agreed, then paused. "And Cordelia, I'm genuinely happy for you. This Alexander seems like someone who really sees you, and that's what everyone deserves." After they left, Alex and I collapsed onto the couch, emotionally drained by the intensity of the evening's conversations, but also relieved to have finally addressed issues that had been festering for years. "How do you think that went?" he asked, pulling me against his side with gentle familiarity. "Better than I expected," I admitted, "though I suspect the real test will be how they behave over the next few months, not what they said tonight." "Agreed," he replied, pressing a kiss to the top of my head, "but tonight was a start, and sometimes that's enough." The remaining days before the wedding passed in a blur of final preparations and mounting excitement. My family maintained their promise to help with guest coordination, arriving at the estate early Saturday morning to assist with setup and logistics. The Pemberton estate had been transformed into exactly the kind of elegant, intimate celebration I'd envisioned, with gardens in full autumn bloom, providing a spectacular backdrop for the ceremony. Mom threw herself into guest relations with the enthusiasm she'd always shown for social events, directing lost relatives and ensuring elderly family members had comfortable seating. Her organizational skills were genuinely helpful, and I found myself appreciating her contributions without feeling overwhelmed by her management style. Serafina proved surprisingly effective at coordinating with Alex's family members, her natural charm helping to bridge any awkwardness between two social groups that had never met before. She seemed to genuinely enjoy the role, and I wondered if our conversation had opened possibilities for her to contribute to family events in ways that felt meaningful rather than obligatory. The ceremony itself exceeded every expectation I'd held for my wedding day. Alex looked magnificent in his formal attire, and the photographer I'd hired captured not just the traditional moments, but the authentic emotions that made the event personally significant rather than merely beautiful. The vows we'd written reflected our shared artistic vision and mutual respect for each other's independence, themes that felt especially meaningful given the recent family conversations. During the reception, I found myself moving between different groups of guests with unprecedented ease. Gallery owners discussed upcoming exhibitions with my photography clients. Alex's family members shared stories about the estate's history with my relatives. Professional colleagues from various contexts mingled comfortably, creating exactly the kind of integrated social environment I'd hoped to achieve. "This is incredible," Jasmine observed during a quiet moment between reception activities. "You've basically created a networking event disguised as a wedding celebration." "The best kind of party," I agreed, watching Alex demonstrate photographic techniques to several guests who'd expressed interest in learning more about the technical aspects of my work. The evening concluded with dancing in the estate's ballroom, a space that had hosted countless celebrations over the decades. I danced with Harrison, who admitted he was impressed by both the event's sophistication and Alex's obvious devotion to supporting my career. I danced with Alex's father, who welcomed me to the family with warmth that felt genuine rather than perfunctory. Most surprisingly, I danced with Mom, who apologized again for her past dismissiveness and promised to do better going forward. "I hope you know how proud I am," she said, as the music played around us, "not just of what you've accomplished professionally, but of the way you've handled everything with such grace and dignity. You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for." The admission represented more growth than I'd thought possible from our family dynamics, and I felt cautiously optimistic about the possibility of building something healthier between us. As the evening wound down, Alex and I stood on the estate's main terrace, looking out over gardens where our guests continued conversations that seemed likely to extend well into the night. The celebration had achieved everything we'd hoped for, but more importantly, it had established a new foundation for how I related to both my family and my professional community. "No regrets?" Alex asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind as we watched the last sunset of our engagement. "Only that we waited so long to do this," I replied, leaning back against his chest, though I suppose the timing had to be exactly right. "It was worth the wait," he assured me, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "All of it?" The following weeks brought a steady stream of evidence that the wedding had accomplished more than just celebrating our marriage. Gallery contacts who'd attended the reception began reaching out with exhibition opportunities and collaboration proposals. Family members who'd rarely acknowledged my photography career started asking informed questions about my artistic process and upcoming projects. Most significantly, the dynamic between Alex and me continued to deepen as we settled into married life and began planning the details of my upcoming exhibition. "I have news," Alex announced one evening as we reviewed the final selection of photographs for the gallery show. "The advanced sales have exceeded our most optimistic projections." I looked up from the print I'd been examining, uncertain I'd heard him correctly. "Exceed them? How much?" "By approximately 30%, he replied, unable to suppress his excitement. "Several collectors who attended the wedding have made significant purchase commitments, and word about your work is spreading through networks we hadn't expected to reach for several more years." The implications were staggering. Not only would the exhibition establish my reputation in the art world, but the financial success would provide security and independence beyond anything I'd imagined possible when we'd first started planning the show. "There's more," Alex continued, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. "I received this today from the Meridian Arts Foundation. They're offering you a residency in Tuscany next summer, all expenses paid, with a guaranteed exhibition of whatever work you produce during the residency." I stared at the formal invitation, reading the terms twice to ensure I understood the scope of what was being offered. A summer in Italy, with complete artistic freedom and financial support, leading to an international exhibition that would expand my career beyond anything I'd previously imagined. "This is because of the wedding connections, isn't it?" I asked, recognizing that the networking opportunities we'd created had exceeded even Alex's optimistic expectations. "Partly," he agreed, "but mostly it's because your work is exceptional and the right people are finally seeing it. The wedding just accelerated a process that was inevitable once your photographs gained proper exposure. That night, I called my family to share the news about the residency offer, feeling genuinely excited to include them in a professional celebration for the first time in years. Italy? Serafina's voice carried wonder and what sounded like sincere happiness. Cordelia, that's absolutely incredible. How long is the residency? 3 months, I replied, still somewhat stunned by the opportunity myself, with complete artistic freedom and guaranteed exhibition of whatever I create there. I'm so proud of you, Mom said, and this time I could hear that she meant it without reservation. This is exactly the kind of recognition your work deserves. The conversation continued for nearly an hour, with each family member asking thoughtful questions about the residency requirements and exhibition opportunities. For the first time since I'd become an adult, they seemed genuinely interested in my professional success rather than simply polite about achievements they didn't understand. The exhibition opening 6 weeks later drew a crowd that filled the gallery beyond capacity, requiring additional security and extended hours to accommodate everyone who wanted to attend. Critics who'd rarely noticed photography exhibitions wrote enthusiastic reviews that praised both the technical excellence and emotional depth of my work. Sales exceeded our projections by such significant margins that Alex had to bring in additional staff to handle the volume of inquiries and purchases. Standing in the gallery that night, surrounded by photographs I'd created over years of dedicated work, watching people respond with genuine appreciation to images that represented my artistic vision, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment that went beyond financial success or professional recognition. Look around, Alex said quietly, joining me near the center of the exhibition space. This is what happens when talent meets opportunity and determination. This is what you built. I followed his gesture, taking in the crowded room where conversations about art and technique continued late into the evening. My family was there, asking informed questions and expressing genuine pride in what I'd accomplished. Professional colleagues were making connections that would benefit their own careers while supporting mine. Collectors were purchasing work that would hang in homes and offices around the world, spreading my artistic vision far beyond what I'd ever imagined possible. We built it, I corrected, squeezing his hand. You saw something in my work that I hadn't learned to see in myself. You created opportunities that would have taken me decades to develop independently. Partnership, he agreed, the word carrying weight that encompassed both our marriage and our professional collaboration, the best kind. As the evening concluded and the last guest departed, I found myself alone in the gallery space, surrounded by empty walls where my photographs had hung for the past month. Everything had been sold or committed to collectors, leaving only the memory of what the exhibition had achieved and the promise of future opportunities it had created. My phone buzzed with a text message from Mom. Thank you for letting us be part of tonight. I finally understand what you've been building, and I couldn't be more proud. Looking forward to celebrating many more successes together. The message represented more than appreciation for the evening's success. It acknowledged the fundamental shift in how my family understood and valued my choices. I was no longer the practical, helpful daughter who handled whatever tasks needed handling. I was an artist with international recognition, a wife in a partnership built on mutual respect and shared vision, a woman who had built something significant entirely on her own terms. 6 months later, as I prepared to leave for the Tuscany residency, I reflected on how completely my circumstances had changed since that morning when Mom had worried about me ruining Serafina's wedding mood. The $200,000 exhibition had led to opportunities worth far more than money, creating a career trajectory that established my independence while opening doors I'd never imagined possible. "Ready for the next adventure?" Alex asked, helping me load camera equipment into the car that would take us to the airport. "More than ready," I replied, looking back at the life we'd built together and forward to the possibilities that lay ahead. "Though I suspect this is just the beginning." He smiled, the expression carrying all the confidence and support that had first drawn me to him at that gallery opening almost 2 years earlier. The very best beginnings usually are. As we drove toward the airport, I thought about my family's transformation from people who dismissed my ambitions to supporters who celebrated my successes. I thought about Alex's unwavering belief in my artistic vision and his determination to create opportunities for me to succeed. Most of all, I thought about the power of building something meaningful on your own terms, then sharing it with people who could appreciate what you'd accomplished. The practical, overlooked Cordelia, who'd moved boxes to the garage before Serafina's wedding was gone, replaced by someone who knew her own worth and insisted that others recognize it too. It had taken courage to claim that independence, wisdom to build it carefully, and determination to protect it from those who would have managed it according to their own preferences. But most importantly, it had taken the recognition that sometimes the people who claim to know us best are actually the ones who understand us least, and that the most profound changes often happen when we stop seeking approval and start building lives that reflect our actual values and ambitions. The plane lifted off toward Italy, and the next chapter of a story I was finally writing entirely for myself, surrounded by people who celebrated rather than simply tolerated the person I'd chosen to become.